So a few years ago for Endwalker, I made a guess on where the prehistoric legendary fish was going to be in Endwalker, and I got the zone right at least. I didn't get the fish correct. I thought it was going to be Tiktaalik. It ended up being Paraxis, but that's relatively hard to guess. And I, but I got it. The fact that it was in Garlemald. This time for Dawntrail, a few people have asked, like, "Hey, Rudy, where do you think the legendary fish are going to be?" Because we're coming up on patch 7.5 and they get added at the end of patch 7.5. We're expecting the legends in either patch 7.55 or 7.56. And so I thought, why not just talk about legendary fish in general and what they are and where they could end up being and why I think they might end up being there. And will any of this be right? Maybe, probably not. But don't use this as a way to set expectations. Use this just kind of as like a fun little way to, we can start having a conversation about legendary fish. We can, you can start learning about, what exactly make legendary fish legends, and what could we be seeing in Dawntrail. So don't take this as like this is precisely where they're going to be. We do have a lot of information and like patterns for the legendary fish, but in truth, it's not even after what 11 years, 5 games, 6 games worth of legendary fish, we don't have enough to really be able to say this is what it's going to be because it changes every time. So we're just going to go through Dawntrail. I'm going to go zone by zone. I'm going to talk about what I think, where the legendary fish could be and why, and we're going to talk about what makes a legendary fish. It'll be fun. You probably also noticed there's video tied to this. I am just going to say right now, the video is mostly so if I have to show the fish guide, it's a whole lot easier for me to do so. If you want to just listen to this like all the other previous rambles, please go ahead and select another tab and just listen to it. You won't really miss out on anything. I won't be saying, "Oh, well, look here," because I'll just say it out loud. So anyways, before we dive in, what actually makes a legendary fish a legendary fish? And most people will say, what's the most hell spawn hatred spitting fish in the game? And that's a legendary fish, pointing at usually like Cinder Surprise or Charbonnet or Sea Butterfly or Sidereal Whale. And those people are wrong. Legendary fish have historically been challenging, yes, and they put your knowledge of the fisher's kit to the test. But what we've seen from existing legends, as the 30 plus that we have, or the 30 that we have, excuse me, they aren't really meant to be incredibly challenging or necessarily rare on their own. There are non-legendary fish that are rarer than legendary fish, but they are designed to be unique and stand out. And the term that I will probably use a lot is, and that a few other people use as well, is novel. They are basically the legendaries break quote unquote the rules that we usually expect out of a big fish, and they just try and do something fun. They have always been the last 6 fish added in an expansion, which is why we're expecting them in either patch 7.55, which is when they've been released in the last 2 expansions, or in my opinion, they could also come in 7.56 because that's when they came out in Stormblood, and we haven't had a 7.56 since Stormblood. I don't know. Who knows? That's not what we're here to talk about. We're just here to talk about legendary fish. But at this point, it's still a couple of months, if not more, away from when they're coming out. But I'm going to put it in now just in case there's something that pops up in 7.5 base release. Anyways, I'm just going to go in order of appearance of these of the zones. I'm just going to talk about them in the order of the appearance. We are not going to be talking about the cities because cities historically do not get legendary fish with fishing holes. So we're not going to be talking about Tuliolol or Solution 9. Purse of Riches has a basically 0% chance of being used as a legendary. Please stop making that comment. I have seen it probably about 100 times over the past few months. But let's uh let's just get started into the first zone. So I lied. I actually want to talk about what I'm hoping for first when it comes to legendary fish. Um, when I talk about what I want to see for legendary fish, at least in this expansion, what I'm kind of hoping for are what I call like the Heaven's Ward and Stormblood era legendary fish. These are not necessarily like, oh, I just want more sea butterflies or more charbonnets or more ruby dragons. No, I want to see fish where I can have multiple attempts at that fish during the window, not just because I'm casting all the time. Either I get multiple intuitions like Charbonnet or Sea Butterfly or Rhomdelopterus or Drepanapsis. Those are all very fun legendaries because you have to optimize not around a single intuition but multiple intuitions over a long period of time. And legendary fish that have somewhat more common windows, at least at the cost of being incredibly slippery, like Xenacanthus, or being a relatively rare bite, like Sculptors and Stethocanthus. A fish like Snowy Praxis would also fit in this category pretty well, but isn't that's obviously an Endwalker fish, so it doesn't fall into that. But Snowy Praxis is a good example of what I think a not like a modern Heaven's Ward or Stormblood era Heaven's Ward. Uh, I got that backwards. Snowy Praxis would be a good example of a modern Heaven's Ward Stormblood era legendary fish. I feel like these fish are really like probably the most engaging and some of the most well aged legendary fish, and so I would really like to um, see more of those. And while there are other engaging fish, I think like sidereal whale, especially if you aren't jailing, and I highly recommend not doing that because you don't. It's a waste of time unless you're doing it for like an hour. I don't know. And Hyphlosaurus from Endwalker, both of those were pretty fun uh, and exciting legends, but they weren't really the same thing. So I really just want to see most of the legendary fish in Dawntrail regularly come up, like maybe multiple times a day, like sea butterfly, or like once every other day or something. I think it'd be a really nice way to kind of balance out the Dawntrail fishing log and really cement this as a truly great fisher expansion. So here we are in Kozama'uka. There's a fair number of places that I initially felt that this could be good legendary fishing holes. I was first looking at like Bopo Uihi, Peaks Poga, which we just got Punani Pain in, Miabek Zoo, Miabek Zay, Marshall Gaka. There's a lot of really good fishing holes here. Miyakabek Zoo is in the northeast corner. It's that river next to the water's Hanu. This could be a relatively interesting fishing hole for a legendary fish because it is predominantly powerful hookset fish. The big fish, Riverlong Candiru, isn't a super common bite. It's also one of the first fish we got, one of the first big fish we got. So it's not a super common bite, but it isn't also super rare. I think it could probably play well with like a straight catch intuition fish, maybe, or a mooch off of any of these fish. I think it all would be relatively interesting and engaging because we now start have to balancing out like, do we want to use the ambitious or modest lure? Do we need an intuition? One of the things that I'm hoping we see is a hidden intuition fish, so a fish that requires the use of not only ambitious and modest lure, or modest lure I should say, to be caught, but also requires an intuition on top of that. We have not yet seen that. We don't actually even know if it's technically possible. From our understanding of how it works, the lure use is tied to the fish and the intuition is tied to the fishing hole. So, and I'll mention this a few more times, you can only ever have one intuition per fishing hole, but in theory, though we have not yet seen it in the overworld, you can have multiple hidden fish per fishing hole. We don't know how that works yet because we haven't seen it, but if it's going to show up, it will be with the legendary fish. So I think Miyaka Bekzu could be interesting just because most of these fish are powerful hook sets. Having uneven bite hook set distributions can lead to more interesting use, especially when there's a lot of overlapping bites as well, because you then have to start thinking about like, should I be using Ambitious Lure like we do with Punity Pain? We use Ambitious Lure, but not to guarantee that the Hunu peacock or the Hunu peacock bass bites, but to in fact minimize the bitings of the precision hook set fish. Um, or should I use it to make it more likely to bite? Like, I think there's a whole lot of different things. Plus, I think the whole area that uh, Kozama'uka is based on is very full of river based stories of like large fish. And so, if there was going to be a legendary fish, I would expect it to be in the river, and this one makes the most sense. The reason I'm not saying Peaks Poga is because it's already really interesting uh, with Punity Pain. And Punity Pain is basically kind of a legend in its own right. It would be super interesting to have a legendary fish that interacts with Punity Pain, but at that point, I feel like it would just be either like catch Punity Pain, get intuition, and then it's like a straight catch fish. Maybe it's another mooch. That would be potentially very interesting if it's, you have to catch Punity Pain and then get an intuition and then catch another fish that might be also mooched off the Hunu peacock bass. Um, the bite rate of Punity Pain, I'm not too confident in betting on that idea, but Peaks Poga could work, but it's also already interesting enough. I think like it would, if they put a legendary fish in Peaks Poga, it's probably either going to be kind of boring compared to Punity Pain, or it's going to be involving Punity Pain, and it is going to be absolutely ridiculous and just throw off like the balance of the entire fishing experience in the zone. So Peaks Poga, not my first choice, but I think that there is a possibility for that there. Now we are moving also into patch 7.5 is in just a couple of weeks, and we don't have big fish yet in Marsh Lagaka or Miyakabek Zoma. I think either of those could. Well, I think both of them could have potentially interesting big fish, mostly because of dumpling fish. Dumpling fish is a moochable fish, and in Miyakabek Zoma, it will mooch into a banded Candiru or an Oxydoris. So being able to have like a third fish introduced into that mooch could be potentially very interesting. I'm kind of betting on the banded Candiru, but it could be either of those. Marsh Lagaka, though, has the yellow peacock bass, which this is a timed mooch fish. It's up for an hour and really is a good show off. Like it was a good early show off. It's a like 500 at the time of recording, 500 orange script bait fish. It's a collectible. Um but it's a really good show off of the new kit because you can use uh Modest Lure to bring dumpling fish out. You can use surface slap with Modest Lure. You almost basically have to use Spareful Hand in order to optimize the yellow peacock bass window because it is so small. And I really, really have this hope that we get like a multi-phase legendary fish where it comes up every day, which we have precedent for with the Greater Serpent of Ronka, at least, and Xenacanthus. But it kind of has like, all right, the prep phase is catch 4 dumpling fish and then just catch 4 dumpling fish, get ready for the yellow peacock bass window. Then the yellow peacock bass window is you dump out all the dumpling fish and you catch as many yellow peacock bass as you can and store those because the legendary fish is up as well. And so you have if the legendary fish would probably need to be longer than the yellow peacock bass window, but basically the way that I look at it is prep dumpling fish, catch yellow peacock bass, and then you have a decision to make. Do you want to immediately mooch the yellow peacock bass at a chance of getting the legendary fish, or do you store the yellow peacock bass for a chance at getting more yellow peacock bass to then mooch into the legendary fish, depending on the timing of that? I think that could be very fun for a legendary fish here specifically. I think there's also an opportunity for this to be like a greater serpent of Ronka style fish where the uh, dumpling fish mooches into a yellow peacock bass, which then mooches into something else following the same rule, and then that's something that third step would be the big fish, and then that big fish goes and mooches into the legendary fish. I don't know. I'm trying really hard not to say this is what I think it will be, but like I need to use other fish obviously as an example of what I'm saying. But I think if there's going to be a legendary fish and if it is in Marsh Lagaka, I highly suspect that it will be mooch heavy. I don't know if it'll be off of yellow peacock bass, but I suspect that it would be off of dumpling fish. At least that's my hope. They have a really good setup for a very interesting mooch chain, which would be great for showing off Spareful Hand. It would be great for using makeshift bait. Um, it would be great for showing off the lures. I think that would be a ton of fun. Even if it is like the intuition is tied to yellow peacock bass, maybe that would be fun. So there's a lot of options specifically for Marsh Lagaka. Um, because dumpling fish too can be, like I said, dumpling fish can be mooched in both Miabexoma and Marsh Lagaka. I'm suspecting that either of these big fish are going to be the big fish in 7.5. Either of them I suspect will be mooches, like I said, but I suspect that if there's going to be a legendary fish in this region, it will probably be in Marsh Lagaka over Miabexoma. Lastly was Bopo Uihi, and if I botched that pronunciation, I am sorry. I tried my best. This is the home of Muttering Matamata, which is another mooched fish. You might be picking up on a few themes here of what I'm thinking with legendary fish. Um, it, Muttering Matamata is really the only hugely notable thing in this fishing hole. Like there are, I think turn-ins or leaves or something like that in this fishing hole as well. I originally thought that this could be a really good legendary fishing hole, and I think it still could be, but I don't know if it's my top choice. Um, maybe if it is like a straight catch fish with a trigger intuition off of all of these, or maybe a hidden fish that requires some other thing, could be interesting, just because there's a lot of some split of the bites here, but I'm not too sure. Like it's, I wanted to bring it up because a few people have mentioned that it could be here. I don't disagree with that, but I don't know if it'd be my first choice. So yeah, so I think really coming out of it, if I had to pick just a couple, it would be uh Miyakabex Zoo, Peaks Poga, and Marsh Lagaka are probably my top three choices for where the legendary fish will be. Weirdly, the Deucebun Bank could potentially have one, but I don't think it's fancy enough. This would be like your unconditional type fishing hole, or like Lopoceros elegans would probably be like a Deucebun Bank type of fish as well. I wanted to mention that because I think I talked about literally every one except maybe Waters Hanu, but that's I'm not that one. I'm not really thrilled with. That one just doesn't feel right. Oh, actually, this one too, the Kuoxage, Kuyuoxage. We just got Shuckfin Dace in patch 7.4. That one could also the one joke I made now is that because we have Corn Dace and because we have Shuckfin Dace, we could have a Corn Servant Legendary in this fishing hole. I think that would just be really funny. That would be like a haha funny joke on the scale of the Greater Serpent of Ronka. So that's sitting there, but realistically, I don't know if I would put that as at the top of my list either. But again, for Kozama'uka, Marshallgaka, Miabek Zoo, Peaks Poga, and I guess Coaxage would be the kind of the four that I would be keeping an eye on for potential legendary fish. All right, so in Urqopacha, Carvahar the First is almost likely where the legendary fish is going to be. This fishing hole is large enough to support a large population of players who are going to be going for the fishing, who are going to be fishing for the legendary fish, assuming it's necessary. We have seen historically that legendary fish are in fishing holes that are relatively large and have enough space for people to fish in. There are a couple of exceptions, like Endoceras has a very small amount, so if you get more than like 20 or 30 people there, it's a little crowded. But fishing wasn't as big back then. Snowy Paraxis is probably the smallest fishing hole that we have access to for a legendary fish, but typically we see legendary fish in holes that are relatively spread out. Actually, I guess maybe the Chlorophospon and Lopoceros elegans from Endwalker would probably be also one of the smaller ones as well. But it's still like it's small, but there's like a lot of it's kind of spread out. I don't know. The main point is when we look at legendary fish, I also consider space. So Dewspun Bank, I was talking about like, oh yeah, could be there. There's not a lot of space to fish there. So if you have 20 or 30 people going for that fish, it's going to be a little crowded, and that's going to ruin the experience. So I think they're conscious about that, and so we wouldn't see that there. But Carvahar the First is relatively large, and it is almost likely where it's going to be because the fishing hole is just relatively interesting overall. It's a 50-50 split on the bites, but it has two timed fish with Prime Adjudicator and Urko Frog. And it still keeps the split depending on the time, but it's kind of there's some movement and dynamics there. Prime Adjudicator is short enough and slippery enough that we could see it be part of either like a legendary mooch or an intuition. Think of something like Lancet Fish, maybe. Same thing with Urko Frog, though a little bit more common. And maybe likely some other fish in the fishing hole as well. If there was like an intuition, I would expect it to be Prime Adjudicator and something else, or two Prime Adjudicator and something else, or a few something else's. I could also see it as a mooch if we wanted to go with like a lighter Priest of Yaklaqua, Greater Serpent of Ronka type thing, or like Sidereal Whale, or even Endoceras would be like probably there too, but you can kind of force the bite on Endoceras. You might not necessarily be able to do that here. The point is, I think it would be it just in my experience, and this is really all I can say to this. I can't really speak or give any other reason beyond. It just feels like that's where the legendary hole is going to be. Like from the start, myself and others were like, this is where the legendary hole, this is where the legendary fish is going to be, even before Prime Adjudicator was added. That said, what we can probably guess is that it will likely be a large legendary fish. So it'll probably be something big, just given on the size and depth of the water. In reality, if I had to make that guess that I made again, like I did in Endwalker, and I made it again now, Urqopacha in Carvahar the First is most likely where that prehistoric fish is going to go. I don't know which prehistoric fish it would be this time around, but that is my guess. It would probably be some like older lungfish, and that would be it. But that would be my guess, as likely there, but also if there's going to be a prehistoric extinct fish, it will likely be in Carvahar the First. That said, I want to make a pitch for Sunken Stars. Sunken Stars has a relatively uneven bite, like hook set up here. So it's mostly just like precision hook set fish and two powerful hook set fish out of the 5. Plus, Moon Gripper itself is a precision hook set fish. So it's like a 4-2 imbalance. The hidden fish, moon gripper, I think could be a interesting fish because it bites often enough. It's not uncommon to see, two, maybe three catches in a window. If you don't, it is more. It's uncommon to not catch moon gripper in the window, but it is also up every day. The hole itself is roughly the same size as the Eblan Thaw for Snowy Paraxis, which is, like I said, one of the smallest legendary fishing holes, at least for the modern ones. And I think it just could be interesting overall. So I really think, like, if they wanted to go potentially weird and crazy with a small legendary fish, think like a species the size of like Unconditional, they could do that in Sunken Stars. It would also give us our second Salt Lake legendary fish, which I will be mentioning these uncommon biomes or these unique biomes a bit more in the future. It would give us another Salt Lake legendary to go with Stethocanthus, which would be great. Um, and I think it's just Sunken Stars would be like the let's do something weird and wild legendary. Carvahar the First is going to be the fishing hole where it's like let's have a legendary that people are familiar with the idea of going for, which is not to say bad. I don't want to make that sound bad. I think either Carvahar the First or Sunken Stars, both of those are going to be excellent choices for um, for legendary fish in general. I don't think it's going to be in Chirwagar Lake. I don't think it's big enough. I don't think it's really all that interesting. There's just four fish in there, but we don't have a big fish yet. So who knows? That might change. Really, the only standout thing that of note in Chirwagar Lake is all right, all right, all right. This was the big fish that was named in a Mad Libs style guessing game type thing that was done at the the North American Fan Fest in 2023 in Las Vegas. In case you were wondering, that's why its description is so long and that's why it has such a funny name. This would this is really not my first choice. I don't think there's enough interest here. Then again, we haven't really had anything else to go to the fishing hole for us, so maybe it is. I don't know. I don't think it'll be here though. I really do think that it'll probably be Carvahar the First, or Carvahar the First, or Sunken Stars. Right. So for Yak T'el, this is the first zone where it actually is probably easier to just list out where I don't want the legendary fish to be, and that is the chain shark fishing hole, specifically Soli. And the only reason is because it's ugly. There's been a lot of conversation around chain shark being required for a legendary fish because we saw that with Philania being required for sidereal whale. I am going to remind everybody that the Philania and chain shark equivalent of Heavensward and Shadowbringers were not used for legendary fish. That was Barreleye and Apoak, respectively. However, in Stormblood and Endwalker, we did see those rare fish used, and that was Sculptor and Philania. So if the pattern holds, we won't see Chain Shark used this time around, but the only thing consistent with fishing is that it's inconsistent. So who knows? I personally think that, I think that fishing hole, the Team Exoli, is interesting, but it's not the most interesting now. I think it is kind of boring. I think it isn't really all that fun to look at. It's got space for everybody, but I think if they do that, it would I would really need to be convinced on if that would be a good legend or not. Otherwise, it's actually really hard to guess where the legendary fish could be. The first place that kind of stands out is Soli. This one has a pretty decent spread of fish. Doesn't have any mooches yet. That could change. They can always add legends, or they could always add mooches with the legendary patches, but who knows? It does have a slightly uneven hook set distribution, and like I said, this is going to be a running theme of what makes a good fish. And Iron Shadow Tongue specifically is a bit fish that isn't too hard to get, but it just kind of sits around at like the just kind of annoying to get stage. Um, it feels similar to like Shadeshifter with Aquamaton or what would be the other one? I dare not say Moratecta, but technically Moratecta if Moratecta didn't slip as much. Um, so we could see a potentially interesting fish set up here. If it does, I would really hope that it involves Iron Shadow Tongue in some way, either as a mooch or not. Uh, it could be interesting. Yakawak Soli, just to the west of it, is another potentially interesting one. I've thought about this one for a while. I think Mirror Carp could play an interesting role next to Apoda. Um, and it leads to some interesting possibilities of forcing lure usage. A lot of fishing holes are pretty balanced with their, in Dawntrail at least, with their hook sets. Like usually it's like 4 fish or 6 fish and like half are precision hook set, half are powerful hook set, and then they end up being like, oh, you slap one modest lure and you get the other, like type of thing. Um but Yakawak solely to me has the one distinct standout of it also including a collectible fish, which is mirror carp. And this is something that we have seen sometimes with fish where, like, especially like with Philania, where even if you don't get sidereal whale, you have a Philania now, which you can use to reimburse some of the, like, you kind of get paid back for your time. And while Mirror Carp does give the low tier script, if I remember correctly, it could just be an interesting dynamic there. The Yakawak core is also part of custom deliveries, which is why it uses its preferred bait is listed as metal spinner. I don't expect that to be part. I don't actually expect any of the custom delivery fish to be part of a legendary. It would be interesting if they do, especially now because the custom delivery fish aren't added to the fishing hole unless you start the like quest to unlock that NPC for the custom delivery, which is new for Dawntrail. So that would be an interesting way to kind of force people to unlock uh the custom delivery fish, is to require it as part of a legendary fish. Um that way we kind of avoid the whole issue that we had in Endwalker around the Studium and like Elpis with Urqopacha and Snowy Paraxis. That's a whole other thing. You can look that forum post up on the forums. It was a good post. It was a valid argument. But I think that would be really interesting. I think though Mirror Carp also does adds to some shenanigans with Collector's Glove holding, which we saw kind of get reinforced with Garly Ichthys and Endwalker, and like obviously it was happening in Stormblood with Sculptor. So there could be, I mean, this any of the collectible fish. This going back to Kozama'uka, same thing with yellow peacock bass. Like we could see some collector's glove holding shenanigans. I don't know, but yeah, and I think it's also just a really large fishing hole, and so it could accommodate those large player counts that we would see, like when with early sidereal whale or cinder surprise or even Aelid Scon. Now that's just the northern part of Yak T'el. The southern part of Yak T'el actually doesn't have any. Well, this one has a lot of missing big fish, specifically Sapsweet Cenote, Bitterbark Cenote, and Cenote Jayunja. All don't have big fish, and we'll be getting them likely in 7.5. I should probably also mention that while it hasn't happened recently, we do have some precedence of legendary fish being added to a fishing hole where no big fish is added. Now, they haven't done that since Shadowbringers, or sorry, since Stormblood with Warden of the Seven Hues and Prism Lake. That was a quiz question on this channel last week. I'm not expecting that to happen, but it is something that could happen. But down in the south, it's hard to guess specifically around Sapsweet Cenote and Bitterbark Cenote. I think these guys will definitely be getting big fish. If I had to make a guess, it would probably be the Yak T'el Caiman for Bitterbark, and I would personally hope the Twig Catfish for Sapsweet Cenote. Um, but I think if we were to see a legendary fish, it would likely be, or at least a legendary fish in the southern part of Yak T'el. It will likely be in Cenote Jiyunja or Cenote Moxitaral. Cenote Jiyunja does not have a big fish yet, so it's really hard for me to make a guess on how that's going to work. But I really do have my eyes on it specifically just because of the fact that, it has 5 of these fish. It is a uneven hook set worthy of uneven hook set distribution of 3 powerful hook set fish, 2 precision hook set fish. It has 3 unique, quote unquote, unique species of fish with Veritas, Welcome Catfish, and Flawless Saucer. So it's kind of primed to have an interesting potential of fish, but if anything, I think in 7.5, Cenote Jiyunja is going to either get a lot of action in 7.5 base for its big fish or 7.55, 7.56 for the legendary fish as well. Which I'm probably going to guess is either going to be the Welcome Catfish or the Flawless Saucer. In my opinion, the wild choice would be the Flawless Saucer, but in reality, they might just pick the Welcome Catfish. The other option in the south that I think it could be is in Cenote Moxitaral, and if before patch 7.4, I probably would not have guessed this. But with Moxitaral Great Gar, it sits as a potentially interesting interactor with big fish or with legendary fish. In the patch 7.4, which was a patch full of otherwise very remarkably low downtime fish or just challenging fish, low uptime fish, or challenging fish like Punity Pain, Great Gar was actually relatively easy. It and Shuckfin Dace kind of just got underneath the fence while everyone fought over Punity Pain, Heirloom Gold Grouper, and Purse of Riches. But I think because of the mooch and the fact that Moxitaral Great Gar is a relatively common biter and it isn't a super long downtime fish, like it is definitely the more common of the Dawntrail 7.4 big fish. Yeah, it has an uptime of 2.4 hours and it's up as of recording, it's up like 6 times tomorrow. This I could see, or I would even love for this to be where the legendary fish is with like a Moxitaral Greater Gar or something. I don't know. But I think Moxitaral Great Gar would lead to an interesting balance of engaging without necessarily being too annoying because it does slip, but it doesn't slip all that often. Like I think Moxitaral Great Gar is just a fun fish to go for, so having a legendary tied to it is always a plus. But with Cenote Jiyunja, it'll be a little bit more challenging to make a guess because don't know because we don't have a big fish yet. So it could be mooched, it could not be. Who knows? We'll find out here in a couple of weeks. So probably top picks for Yak T'el would be Cenote, Jiyunja, Cenote Moxitaral, and probably Ixrac solely would be the top 3 places that I would look to see for a legendary fish. Again, these are purely guesses just based off of experience and a little bit of like looking at past fishing stuff. But if we know anything about fishing, just because it happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen again. We are at the whims of fish dev. So, Shaaloani, all of these fishing holes are good. That like seriously, I probably have spent more time thinking about Shaaloani's legendary fish than I have thought about all the other ones combined. With the exception of Nikawirpi, they are all very strong contenders for a legendary fish. And even then, Nyctowarpy is actually not bad. I would be disappointed because, not because Nyctowarpy is a bad fishing hole, but because the other ones are just way more interesting. There's so much potential for interesting legendary fish in all the other holes except Nyctowarpy, but like I don't know, the only way I could be down, the only way I think we can be disappointed with the Shaaloani Legendary is if it is intentionally designed to be boring. It is very hard to be not boring in any of these fishing holes. Lake Teori already has a really interesting fish with Takatoa, and it has a very interesting distribution of fish, predominantly powerful hookset related, or yeah, predominantly powerful hookset related through like the Nyctowarpy trout, trail trout, and the sucker. They all roughly overlap. Um, the Tirali paddlefish is relatively rare compared to Takatoa, who isn't even that rare. I actually wonder if the Tirali paddlefish is rare or not. Um, I I don't want to even guess what they could do because I really just want to be surprised. I think the Shaolani Legendary could be a ton of fun in Lake Teori. Play around with the paddlefishes a little bit, especially like Takatoa and the Tirali paddlefish. That way, we're utilizing mooches a lot more. Um, I think that could be a ton of fun and be relatively interesting. It's a big enough fishing hole to support everybody, so like that's not a problem. And it has a collectible in it with a Teori sucker, so you get a little bit of like money back in scripts. Like it's a really good fishing hole. Like Lake Teori, all of Shaolani is just probably my favorite place to fish in all of Dawntrail, and I think uh, Lake Teori has a ton of potential for some really interesting fish, especially if it's going to be playing around with the mooch. Like if the Lake Teori fish isn't a mooch, I would that would be the disappointment. You got to be able to let this guy mooch. And yes, due to Tender Valley, there is the opportunity for the Greater Serpent of Tiral to make an appearance to kind of counter the Greater Serpent of Ronka that we saw in Shadowbringers. I would not put it past Square Enix to do that, especially the especially the English localization team. I would not, you know, rule that out as a possibility, and it would most likely be in Lake Tawari. Um, just due to proximity to Tender Valley. I don't think it would be in Nyctowarpy though, because that Nyctowarpy is just a river. It's a little bit too small to hold that. I think it would be like Teori would be where it is. Conversely, we could also see, because we do have Northern Lake Tawari here, we could see like a legendary gar. We have a bunch of gobies, carps that are sitting in there as well in the spearfishing hole. So like we have a bunch of species that we could pull from as well. So like if you're into like what species of fish can I catch, that's another option as well. But in the overworld fishing, I really think that Lake Teori is going to be a very strong contender for a very good legend, and they would have to like intentionally make it a bad legend in this. I think you would have to, you would, you accidentally could make a good legend if you just put something in Lake Tawari. The Zoger, the sorry, not the Zogers, the Zorgers, eastbound and westbound, both are also extremely good. Um, they both have like uneven bite distributions. They both have hidden fish. In westbound Zoger, we have the Sunray Ray, which is going to be a fake out ferocious bite. So if the big fish, which we will find out in 7.5, is a uh, straight catch fish, it will likely be there will be some fake outs because you will have to deal and contend with the Sunray Ray. So how are you going to manage that? Or do you have to slap it? Or are you going to have to deal with timings? Are we going to need to, figure that all out? If it's a precision hook set fish, there's a lot of other options too because you don't really have a you have a predominantly heavy, powerful hook set side fish or powerful hook set heavy fishing hole. I'm speeding up and getting a little bit too far ahead of myself here, but how is that going to play with the other fish in the hole? Like, what is it going to be? How's that going to work? Um, and with the introduction of hidden fish, we started seeing this with Sunray Ray. The question then becomes, in a fishing hole where hidden fish exist and you want to use the lure of the hidden fish, is it worth it to use the lure? You see that both with Westbound Zoger due to the Zoger Condor and Eastbound Zoger with the Cloud Wasp specifically. Both of these open up a ton of possibilities of seeing a second hidden fish, which I mentioned before. We don't have that yet. It's right now there's like one hidden fish in a fishing hole. We haven't seen a double yet in the overworld, so we could potentially see that here. We have another, like I said, another uneven distribution in Eastbound Zoger, and then it comes down to like which one, like, do I need to use lure? Which fish is it going to be? Like all that type of thing. And then finally, Zorgor, both of these are both the first sky fishing spots that we have had since Heavensward. And like the Sea of Clouds with Makugul Island and that whole area. Churning Mists would be the other one as well. And due to the size of the fishing hole, which is basically a giant vast chasm, there is the potential and the hope from some people that our legendary fish or even the big fish coming up in Westbound could see a new record size for skies, which oddly enough is not held by Heavensward fish. It's actually been set by Shonisaurus since A Realm Reborn at 275.4 ilms. That is something that we did see a little bit of glimmer of hope for record size fish with the addition of big game fishing, because that pushes fish to the upper, like the very upper limits of their size based on however your perception is. So that's how close you are to the end, or the max size depends on your perception. But with Shonisaurus, it's not too difficult to get nowadays. With big game fishing, even before big game fishing, it wasn't too difficult to get. So giving the record hunters a little bit of something to do at the end of Dawntrail would be great. I know I would probably go for it. I think it would be I think just because I think, like I said, all of Shaaloani is just fun to go for. I think it'd be really fun to try and get like push for that record size in the skies anew. And we have seen recent updates to the records. At the end of Endwalker, the coastline. Well, okay. At the end of Endwalker, the coastline record was supposed to go up with Durdina fish, but it was bugged and it wasn't fixed until until Dawntrail. So Durdina fish was supposed to be the record size until Dawntrail, but because it was bugged, it actually got superseded by is it Goldenfin Trevally, I think, and Chain Shark for coastlines. But so record size fish would be amazing to see, and we really have that opportunity here in Shaaloani with Westbound and Eastbound Zorger. But Shaaloani, there is so much possibility for interesting fish. I have really, really high hopes for the Shaaloani Legendary. I cannot pick which one it would be. Westbound, Eastbound Zorgor, and Lake Teori are like those are my three top picks. But it's three top picks out of the 4 fishing holes in the entire zone, and none of them I think would be bad. It's literally just how interesting do they want to be, and I think the most interesting ones are going to be Eastbound, Westbound, Zorgor, just because of the sky fishing aspect. Right, with Heritage Found, this is the first zone that has all of its big fish. So we have a fish in all 4 of a big fish in all 4 of the fishing holes. This is a complete zone, so we're not going to be getting a big fish in 7.5. The next fish added to Heritage Found will be the legendary fish, or the custom delivery fish, but shh. But despite that, nothing immediately stood out for me. We have 3 hidden fish in all out of the 4 zones. The drift downs with thunder swift trout, crackling canyons with thunderous flounder, and then gold grouper, not heirloom gold grouper. Gold grouper is the hidden fish of the Alexandrian ruins. Uh, the Alexandrian ruins is kind of this is very much going off vibes. Feels like it could be a potential legendary fishing hole, but I don't feel too amazing with the fish that are there. Heirloom gold grouper is outside of Purse of Riches, actually has the longest average downtime between windows of any big fish now. It just got, you probably didn't know that because it got superseded by Purse of Riches. Uh, in fact, like the average highest time, like Cinder Surprise, Bob Goblin Blast, both hovered around 5 days, like around 5 days on average between windows. Heirloom Gold Grouper sits at 7. Purse of Riches at 19 and a half, but that's not about him. Um, so I think Heirloom Gold Grouper is okay. If they go, I hope they don't go with the downtime route for legendaries. That will just prolong the length of everything, and I don't think that they're always as engaging. I have a whole forum thread where I talk about this. I really do hope we see Heavensward, Stormblood, like era fish where they're up a little bit more often. And I think if that is the case, then Alexandrian Ruins probably not going to be where we see a legendary, unless they pull like a Circuit Tilapia Hyphalosaurus type thing where they just don't interact at all. We actually don't see big fish interacting with legendary fish a lot. I'm kind of implying that that is something that is like a guarantee, but it is not. Um, it's really like Lystracanthus with Jaws of the Undeath, Xenocanthus with uh hardhead trout. That's it. Shadeshifter and Aquamaton, Moratecta and Lancetfish. Like there isn't a ton of legendary fish. It's maybe 4 or 5 off the top of my head. Shonisaurus and Mahar. That's the other one. Um, and Drepanapsis and Bond Splitter. So about a fifth of them all that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 more I might have missed, but it is not common. Compared to everything else, more likely than not, it is not going to use a big fish. So I don't think it's going to be Alexandrian ruins. I think there's enough here. I think it's going to be relatively unchanged now. I don't think Heirloom Gold Grouper or Gold Grouper are going to do much. So I'm actually was then looking at some of the other fishing holes. I think Outskirts Shallows is done because that has 5 fish with Sprouting Perch. Sprouting Perch is a relatively not necessarily a remarkable fish, but it does have a somewhat average downtime. It's like maybe a day or 2 between windows or something like that. Nothing huge. Yeah, it's during thunderstorms between 8 and midnight. Straight catch fish. I could potentially see something with that come up, but it isn't. I don't think so. I don't. It doesn't feel right for that to be where a legendary fish is. Crackling Canyon's the same thing. We already have Golden Tail in there. We have uh, Thunderous Flounder, which between all of the hidden fish and between the 2 big hidden fish, I actually think the Drift Downs might actually be where the legendary fish is. It's the Thunder Swift Trout is up relatively often. It is up so often enough. Yeah, it's up daily that as a hidden fish, if they wanted to play it safe, they being Square Enix, like if they just wanted to be like, let's take a good fish and just make it a little different, Thunder Swift Trout would be really interesting to see as like a Xenocanthus type thing. So it being a mooch into a somewhat slippery fish could be relatively fun. I don't think it's going to work well with Thundering Flounder. I don't think it bites often enough. It's not up enough to do that. But I think Thunder Swift Trout could be interesting if they wanted to like mimic Xenacanthus or say Lopoceros elegans if it was a mooch. Basically, what I'm saying is I think the Drift Downs is going to be where the legendary fish will be in this place, followed by Alexandrian Ruins, Outskirt Shallows, and Crackling Canyons being the least likely. But I could see where I think if they're going to bring in that big fish, legendary fish mooch interaction, the Drift Downs is where it would be, purely because I feel like they're just going to mimic Xenacanthus. Um, but that is not necessarily something that has to happen here. It could happen anywhere else. I just think it's happening here because it just, again, kind of vibes on this one. I'm sorry that it's more just vibe-ish. I don't have a lot of quantification for any of these. I can't be like, oh well, because of this precedence, because precedence is just thrown out the window with fishing. We can never assume precedence until it happens. So as such, I'm not going to assume that we're going to see precedence. I'm just kind of saying this is what I think it's going to be, and it's just a ton of fun. This is really just meant to be a fun video as well. Like nothing serious. Please, again, don't set your expectations on this video. Use it as a way of being like, okay, where do I think the legendary fish could be, and kind of think about how you would build your own legendary fish that isn't Hellspawn spitting fire at you and down, for 3 months at a time all the time. But again, if I had to rank Heritage Found, Drift Downs, Alexandrian Ruins, Outskirt Shallows after that, and then Crackling Canyons. I don't think Crackling Canyons is going to see anything new. I don't think Outskirts Shallows will see anything new. It's really coming down to the Drift Downs or Alexandrian Ruins for Heritage Found. Okay, last but not least, we have Living Memory. This was another really tricky zone. There was a lot of options, all of them good. There's 6 fishing holes in here. The one that most people I hear when they think of legendary, where could it be? Canaltown North comes up the most, typically riding on Copper Shark. The big fish in Canaltown North could be really interesting. And I think Copper Shark will be is partially the reason why we could see it be a mooch. We could see a mooch off the Fallen One. If a mooch is introduced in Canaltown North, I would then probably say this would be a very good chance of it being a legendary fishing hole. Canaltown South, I think, is already interesting enough. Between Canal Drum, Butterfly Ray, Hydro Lavar, and Gondola Lavar, like it's already relatively interesting. The method for farming Hydro Lavar, I never made a video on it, but it is relatively simple. It isn't terrible for script farming. I will actually go there every so often when I'm just bored and need orange script. I will go and I'll just do Hydro Lavar because I just find it a little bit more fun than going for condors. But I don't think the legendary will be here. But if it is in here, I wouldn't be surprised, if that makes sense. Like, this wouldn't be my first choice. Proto Alexandria, I am flipping back and forth on. Esperance Carp was mildly disappointing, as also was Shin Snuffler, and I talked about this in a previous video. Mainly because its intuition is the whole window. And since you can only have one intuition per fishing hole, I'm not really expecting much here. Like, if Esperance Carp's intuition was a fraction, like a minute compared to 5, or if its window was the full 23 minutes and it had a 5-minute intuition, then I would be like, okay, maybe there's something else going on here, but there isn't. And so with the intuition already taken up by Carp, they can't even be like, oh, let's have, Carp be, the intuition trigger, because there already is an intuition trigger. And you can't have a hidden intuition fish. And if they just add a hidden fish to Proto Alexandria, then like it's not that exciting. That said, we need to have some unexciting legendary fish like Lopoceros elegans, relatively common, straightforward fish. It's just incredibly slippery. We could see that in any of these fishing holes. I am, like I said, I'm a lot of these are guesses, but uh, when talking about potential for interesting fish, I think Proto Alexandria is relatively low on that list, mostly because of Esperance carp. I also don't think we will ever see a intuition fish like this where you can only catch that intuition fish once in a window, and that window is up, once every few days, because Esperance carp is not very common with its uptime. Um, I really don't think it'll be a mooch, because that would be like one mooch per window. Carp doesn't bite enough for you to get two mooch, or like two intuitions in a window. So I don't think they'll do that. I make it sound like I'm unsure. They will not do that. I know we got Purse of Riches, which is another thing that we said that they would never do, but I'm fairly confident on this one. If they do it on something like that, it's going to be on a fish that's up way more often, not Esperance carp. So I Proto Alexandria almost certainly not. So that leaves around Laynode Arrow with, well, Laynode Arrow, Moose Springs Eternal, and the Knowable. Now, Moose Springs Eternal does have Giga Giant Snakehead, which is another intuition fish, and doesn't have any other intuition fish in there as well. And it's already a short window, so we're not going to see like that mooch come up there. It's usually a like one catch per window type of deal. Maybe not though, because it is not necessarily a difficult catch, and it is an intuition fish, and triggering intuition is not that difficult because it is just three night gobies, and those are easily isolatable, and triple hood exists. I don't necessarily want to rule out it being like, catch an intuition fish and mooch, but we've never had that. We have never had an intuition fish be a mooch for another fish. So I don't have any inclination to see that that's going to change. So I don't think if Moose Springs Eternal has the legendary fish, I don't feel like it's going to. It's not going to involve Giga Giant Snakehead in any way, unless they change in 7.5. Unless they change how intuition rules work, which would be huge, and I love it. But if they do, like, it's not going to work out like that way. So I don't think Moose Springs Eternal it's an interesting fishing hole. Like there's potential for something that isn't relating to Giga Giant Snakehead. Maybe something to do with clearing carp though could be potentially interesting and fun. But it wouldn't be an intuition. Laynode Arrow is in my opinion, probably the least likely of the fishing holes for a legend. Um, it does have the notable fish of Datniotes aeroplanos, which also has bobgoblin bass levels of downtime. Again, you wouldn't know that because Purse of Riches just kind of stole the spotlight from all the fish in 7.4. And again, I can't really explain why. It doesn't feel like there's potential for a lot of interesting fish here. Um, I don't really think that there'll be a legendary fish here. However, in the knowable, the knowable has a hidden fish. It does not have a. It has no intuition, and Harlequin Queen, which is the hidden fish, is kind of relatively interesting and relatively rare. If there was going to be like an intuition relationship between a big fish or imagine something like Aquamaton, where there is a good chance that you can get a intuition for its window, but in reality, like shadeshifters don't bite that often, and so you might not get an intuition for that window. The knowable would be a very good place, I think, if they wanted to replicate an Aquamaton like legendary fish in living memory. The knowable would be where it would be. I think that's probably the most potentially interesting fishing hole here outside of Canal Town North and South. The Knowable could have some potential there. There is also potential that we could see something like a greater serpent of Ronka, a Quamaton mix where we do get introduced to Mooch. I don't think that will happen. I don't think we'll see a Mooch added that isn't already existing. But if we did, it would obviously, I think, be off of Windpath Eel or Harlequin Lancer, because if a fish is moochable in one fishing hole, it's moochable in every fishing hole that it can be caught. And the Rosebud Frog and Night Goby are caught also in Moose Springs, Eternal, and Laynode Arrow. And so they would have to add mooches to those fish as well, but they already have big fish, which is where the mooches would be. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But the knowable, I think, being like a straight catch fish similar to like an aquamaton, uh, could end up being here. I think that this would be a very interesting place to put a legendary fish, but it hinges on requiring Harlequin Queen. If it doesn't require Harlequin Queen, I don't think the potential's there. I would rather have seen it someplace in like Canal Town North and Canal Town South. So overall, Canal Town North, Canal Town South, and the Noble are probably my top three bets. I think these are potentially the most interesting fishing holes in living memory right now. Jury's still out on Canal Town North because we don't have the big fish yet, but we will presumably get that in 7.5. And again, can't be 100% certain. Those are my guesses. But that's just kind of what I'm experiencing and what my gut is telling me. So basically, just kind of wrapping everything up, there are a lot of possibilities for some very interesting legendary fish in the game. For them to be novel and unique, because remember, that's the definition of a legendary fish, not Square Enix hates you. It's novelty and just general interestingness. Nisms. Words are hard. As I said before, I really think that after what we've seen with Big Fish, specifically in patch 7.4, Legendary is closer to like that Heaven's Ward Stormblood era of uptime, which is common, like maybe one or two times a day, or maybe once a day type of thing. Um, make the most sense given our current kit, but I think if we do, I would probably expect them to have shorter windows in some cases. We are going to see a variety of legendary fish. If you think back to all of the legendary fish, some are intuition. I think Heaven's Ward is the exception, where every legendary fish in Heaven's Ward was an intuition fish. I would not complain if that came back to Dawntrail, because I think intuition is an amazing fishing mechanic, especially when done well, with either short intuition and a long window, or um, you know, a medium intuition and a slightly longer window. Um, I think that would make, but I think that era of legendaries kind of throw back to that 3.0, 4.0 era makes sense given the current kit. I really hope that we get to see with these legendary fish. I really hope that we get to see a good expression and use of the new skills we got. I'm definitely expecting one legendary fish to be hidden, regardless of where it is. I really think that with the layout of the fishing holes, we have a lot of potential, and I think those fishing holes stand out, and I hope I highlighted them very well. Now, because I know people will ask me in the future, I'm very hesitant to do this, but I will make a prediction and pick one fishing hole per zone. And it's really just going to be, what do I want to see, not what I think it's going to be. It's what I want for each zone's legendary fish fishing hole. So, in order of appearance, for Kozama'uka, I think Marsh Lagaka would be probably where I'd want to see the legendary fish. I think specifically one that interacts with yellow peacock bass somehow, I think would be a ton of fun. For Urqopacha, Sunken Stars, and I would like for it to be a small legendary fish species. I think it would be great to see a saltwater, like a Salt Lake fish, excuse me, fishing hole, and I feel like that would be the best place to put it between the two Salt Lakes that we have. like I said, likely it'll probably be Carvahar the first, but Sunken Stars is my main guess. For Yak T'el, Ixrac Soli is mostly what I'm expecting, but I am going to throw a nod towards Cenote Mox Tural. I think having an intuition based around probably Amber Salamander and maybe not Amber Salamander, the Salamander in there, and Iron Shadow Tongue would be potentially very, very interesting. I do give a nod though to Cenote Moxitral. I think I would also be fine with a Moxitral, Cenote Moxitral legendary fish as well. For Shaaloani, I still can't pick one. I even wrote in my notes in like caps, pick a damn fishing hole, and I just can't. Um, I really want to see a Skies record fish come out of those. Maybe after patch 7.5, I'll make a guess, but I want to see the Skies Legend fish, but I also want to see a legendary fish in Lake Teori because I think that would be a ton of fun. So if I had to guess, if you had to nail me down to one of those guesses, I would probably say Lake Teori. But in reality, my guess is either going to be not to make a guess at all because they're all good, or just let me. It's any of them except Necrowippy. For Heritage Found, the Drift Downs, I would love to see Thunderswift Trout basically be another Xenocanthus. I think that would be a lot of fun. I think having a daily fish, bringing in a daily legendary fish off of Thunderswift Trout would be fun. It'd be good to use the new lures. You could maybe even swing like a Lancetfish type window where it's the first part of it is collecting Thunderswift Trout with Spareful Hand, and then the second part of it is the actual window for the fish. Um, I think that there's a lot of potential there. And then finally for Living Memory, the knowable. I may have made that. I may have tipped my hand on that one a little bit. I feel like Harlequin Queen has a lot of potential for doing some intuition or some interesting things with intuition or even mooches on its relatively common windows. But Canal Town North could also be interesting as well. But because I don't have a big fish in there, it's hard for me to actually nail that down. But I would say the knowable for sure. So Marsh Lagaka, Sunken Stars, Ixrac Soli, any of them in Shaolani, but like Teori, uh, the Drift Downs and the knowable would be my guesses for where the legendary fish would be. And again, these are just guesses. So please, again, don't use them to set expectations. Instead, just think about what you would want to see in a legendary fish, and obviously you can share that down below if you want or not. I don't care. I'm just told that I need to say that sometimes in these videos. You know, whole comment and subscribe thing, blah 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 blah. You don't have to. It's fine. Just think about it in your head. But we'll find out soon enough what Square Enix has in store with these legendary fish here in the coming months. But that's it for now. I hope you had some fun and I hope you learned something. As always, good luck and happy fishing.